Hey, welcome to another episode of Walking Through the Past with John Hart. I tell you, I've enjoyed doing this one more than any of them I've ever done because it's, again, takes me back to my Appalachian roots. And I did a lot of studying over the last 2.5 years, it seems like, on Appalachian. I've learned so much about it. But this is a great episode. And I think you'll agree, and if you would comment at the end. But anyway, I'm John Hart, and here we go. This episode is Blair Mountain, the second time we shook off tyranny. You know, from August 25th, by the way, which is tomorrow, to September the 2nd, 1921, the mountains of West Virginia shook with the sound of gunfire, marching boots, and the voices of men who had finally had enough. And yet, this event is known by few and celebrated by even fewer. But this event changed the course of history. How soon we forget. We remember 1776, the first time we shook off tyranny. But tucked deep in the coal country, hidden beneath decades of silence and corporate power, lies the story of a second time Americans rose up against oppression. Not against the king, not against a foreign army, but against the coal barons who ruled the Appalachian Hills like feudal lords. This is the Battle of Blair Mountain, the uprising America tried its best to bury. You know, there are moments in history when ordinary people stand up and the ground shakes beneath them. I say we talk a lot about 1776, the first time we shook off tyranny. There was another moment, tucked deep in the coal country of West Virginia, when Americans rose up again. But this time it was not with speeches, not with petitions, but with rifles slung over their shoulders and a justice burning in their chests. In the early 1900s, the coal camps of southern West Virginia were kingdoms. You know, not the kind with crowns and thrones, but the kind where the king wore a suit, owned the mine, owned the land, owned the houses, owned the stores, and owned the men who worked beneath the ground. Miners were paid in company scrip, not money. They lived in company houses. They bought food at company stores, and they were watched by company gunmen. And if a miner spoke up, if he complained, if he dared to try to organize, he was thrown out of his home, beaten, blacklisted, or shot. This wasn't freedom. This wasn't America. This was tyranny, plain and simple. But you know, the fuse was lit in a little town called Matewan. Sheriff Sid Hatfield, a man with a badge and a backbone, stood up to the Baldwin Felt detectives, the hired guns of coal companies, when they tried to evict miners' families. Sid said no. Gunfire erupted, 10 men died, and the miners saw something they hadn't seen in a long time. A man in power standing with them. Sid Hatfield became a symbol, a hero. But heroes make tyrants nervous. A year later, Baldwin Felt's assassins shot Sid on the courthouse steps in Welch, West Virginia. That was it. That was the breaking point. The miners didn't just mourn, they marched. In late August 1921, 10,000 miners gathered, armed and determined. They tied red bandanas around their necks, the origin of the word redneck. Not an insult, but a badge of honor. They marched toward Blair Mountain, where the coal companies had fortified the ridge with machine guns, trenches, and hired soldiers. This wasn't a protest, and this wasn't a strike. This was a battle. For a week and a day, the mountains echoed with gunfire. Miners fought deputies, detectives, and company gunmen. Planes dropped homemade bombs on the miners. It's the only time American citizens were bombed on U.S. soil by their own government. The miners held the ground. They pushed forward. They fought for dignity, for wages, for safety, for the right to live like free men. They fought because no one else would fight for them. And in those mountains, under that smoke, in that chaos, America shook off tyranny for the second time. The U.S. Army eventually arrived. The miners laid down their rifles. Many were arrested, some were tried, and the coal company celebrated. But history has a long memory. The miners lost the battle, but they won the war. Their uprising sparked national outrage. It forced the country to confront the brutality of the coal camps. It led to sweeping labor reforms, union recognition, safety laws, and the birth of the modern labor movement. The miners of Blair Mountain changed the course of American history. And they didn't do it with speeches. They didn't do it with votes. They did it with courage. Now, Blair Mountain isn't just a story about coal miners. It's a story about America, about what happens when ordinary people decide they've had enough. It's about standing up. It's about shaking off tyranny. It's about remembering that freedom isn't something you're given. It's something you defend. And sometimes the mountains remember that better than we do. If you will be kind enough to let me interject something, I've written 3 books on Appalachia. I've experienced and witnessed many of the things, and it is astonishing to me that most of the towns and coal camps mentioned in the books, I've been there in my early years. Where the mountains weep, the church, the creek, the cross, and the coal baron's daughter will transform you back to a time you have never experienced. Thank you for joining me this evening. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and remember, the mountains keep their secrets, but they never forget. If you enjoy these podcasts, please like, share, subscribe, comment. And for information on and sales of my books, go to johnhartauthor.com. God bless you, and I'll see you on the next ridge.